The early morning sun barely peeked through the curtains of the luxurious Blackwood mansion in the heart of Beverly Hills. Inside, a petite figure moved silently through the corridors, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. This was Esperanza Martinez, the newly hired nanny, a woman whose kind eyes belied a past filled with hardship and sorrow. At 28, Esperanza had already weathered more storms than most people face in a lifetime. Her olive skin bore the marks of years spent working under the scorching sun, and her calloused hands told stories of endless toil. Yet, there was an undeniable grace in her movements, a quiet dignity that no amount of suffering had managed to extinguish. As she approached the children's rooms, Esperanza's heart swelled with anticipation. Despite the challenges of her new position, she found genuine joy in caring for 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Max Blackwood. The children had quickly warmed to her gentle nature and the creative games she invented to make their lessons fun. Esperanza softly knocked on Lily's door before entering. "Good morning, sunshine," she whispered, gently rousing the sleeping child. Lily stirred, her golden curls a tangled mess on the pillow. "5 more minutes, Esp," Lily mumbled, using the affectionate nickname she'd given her nanny. Esperanza smiled, running her fingers through Lily's hair. "Come on, sleepyhead. Remember, we have a big day ahead. Your mom's charity gala is tonight, and we need to get you ready." At the mention of the gala, Lily's eyes flew open. "Oh, I forgot. Do you think Mommy will let me wear my new dress?" "I'm sure she will," Esperanza reassured her, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. In truth, she had no idea what Victoria Blackwood, the lady of the house, would allow. In the months since Esperanza had started working for the Blackwoods, she had seen very little of Mrs. Blackwood, and what little interaction they had left Esperanza feeling small and insignificant. As Esperanza helped Lily get dressed, she couldn't help but marvel at the child's innocent enthusiasm. Lily chattered away about the gala, the guests, and the beautiful dresses she imagined everyone would wear. Esperanza listened attentively, offering encouraging words and gentle reminders about manners and behavior. Next, she moved to Max's room, where a similar scene played out. The young boy was more reluctant to leave his bed, but Esperanza's patience and kind words eventually won out. As she helped Max with his bow tie, a task his little fingers struggled with, she felt a surge of maternal affection. "There you go, little man," she said, smoothing down his shirt. "Handsome as can be." Max beamed up at her. "Thanks, Asp. You're the best." The genuine warmth in the children's voices never failed to touch Esperanza's heart. In her previous life, before coming to work for the Blackwoods, such moments of pure joy had been rare. She cherished each one, storing them away like precious gems to sustain her through darker times. As the children ate their breakfast, supervised by the household's cook, Mrs. Peterson, Esperanza busied herself with tidying up their rooms. She was just finishing when a cold voice cut through the air, making her freeze. "Martinez! Where are you?" Victoria Blackwood's imperious tone echoed through the hallway. Esperanza took a deep breath, steeling herself before responding. "Here, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm in Miss Lily's room." The click of high heels on hardwood preceded Victoria's entrance. The woman who swept into the room was the epitome of Beverly Hills elegance, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer clothes, and an air of superiority that seemed to fill every available space. Victoria's eyes narrowed as they landed on Esperanza. "Ah, there you are. I hope you remember that the gala is tonight. I expect the children to be on their best behavior. Can you handle that, or should I hire a proper governess for the evening?" The thinly veiled insult stung, but Esperanza maintained her composure. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood. Lily and Max are very excited about the event. I've been reminding them about proper etiquette all week." Victoria's perfectly plucked eyebrow arched skeptically. "Etiquette?" And what would someone like you know about proper behavior at a high society event? The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Esperanza felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she refused to let it show. I assure you, Mrs. Blackwood, the children will make you proud. Victoria scoffed, her gaze sweeping dismissively over Esperanza's simple attire. See that they do. And for heaven's sake, try to look a little less provincial tonight. You'll be representing the Blackwood household, after all. With that, Victoria turned on her heel and left, leaving behind a wake of expensive perfume and wounded dignity. Esperanza's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down her skirt, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. It wasn't the first time Victoria had made her feel like an outsider, like something less than human. But each barb, each dismissive glance, each cruel word chipped away at Esperanza's resolve. She often wondered if she should just quit, find a job where she wasn't constantly reminded of her humble origins. But then she thought of Lily and Max, of their innocent smiles and the love they so freely gave. She thought of the other staff members, kind Mrs. Peterson, who always saved her a plate of food, Jose, the gardener, who shared her native language and often stopped to chat, and Mr. Thompson, the elderly butler, who treated her with grandfatherly affection. No, she couldn't leave. Not yet. There was too much good here, too much potential for joy. And deep down, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was meant to be here for a reason. Little did Esperanza know that this night, the night of the Grand Blackwood Charity Gala, would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of her world and reveal secrets long buried in the past. As the day progressed, Esperanza threw herself into preparations for the gala. She helped the children practice their manners, rehearse polite conversation topics, and made sure their outfits were spotless. All the while, Victoria's words echoed in her mind, spurring her to prove herself worthy of her position. Evening approached, and the Blackwood mansion transformed into a glittering spectacle. Limousines began to arrive, disgorging Beverly Hills elite onto the red carpet that had been rolled out for the occasion. Esperanza watched from an upstairs window, feeling like Cinderella before the ball, close enough to see the magic, but forever separated from it. Esp! Esp! Max's excited voice broke through her reverie. Can you help me with my cufflinks? Daddy's too busy. Esperanza turned from the window, pushing aside her melancholy thoughts. Of course, sweetheart. Let's get you looking sharp. As she knelt to help Max, a commotion from downstairs caught her attention. Victoria's voice, shrill with panic, carried up the staircase. What do you mean she's not coming? The governor's wife is our guest of honor. This is a disaster. Esperanza's curiosity was piqued, but she focused on finishing with Max's cufflinks. Just as she stood up, smoothing down the boy's jacket, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. You, she snapped, pointing at Esperanza. I need you downstairs. Now. Confused but obedient, Esperanza followed Victoria down to the main hall, where Gregory Blackwood, Victoria's husband, was attempting to calm his wife. Darling, please. We'll figure something out. The gala can't be ruined over one absent guest, Gregory was saying, his handsome face creased with worry. Victoria whirled on Esperanza. You're about the same size as Janet. You'll have to fill in. Esperanza blinked, uncomprehending. I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwood. Fill in for what? Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. The governor's wife, you simpleton. She's had a family emergency and can't make it. We need someone to wear the necklace. The necklace? Esperanza repeated, feeling increasingly lost. Gregory stepped in, his tone gentler than his wife's. The starburst diamond, Esperanza. It's the centerpiece of tonight's auction. It needs to be modeled during the event, and, well..." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "And you're the only one who fits the dress we had made for Janet," Victoria finished, her voice dripping with disdain. "Can you manage to not embarrass us for one night?" Esperanza's mind reeled. Wear a priceless diamond. Interact with the cream of Beverly Hills society? It was beyond her wildest dreams and her worst nightmares. I don't know if I can," she began, but Victoria cut her off. "You can and you will," she hissed. "Unless you prefer to find yourself unemployed come morning?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Esperanza swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. I'll do my best." What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Esperanza was whisked away to Victoria's private dressing room, where a team of stylists descended upon her. Her simple ponytail was transformed into an elegant updo, her face painted with expert strokes of makeup. The plain uniform she wore was replaced by a stunning gown of midnight blue silk that hugged her curves in a way that made her blush. As the final touch, the starburst diamond was fastened around her neck. Esperanza gasped as she caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, beautiful, elegant, and completely out of place. "Remember," Victoria said, her voice low and menacing, "you are to say as little as possible. If anyone asks, you're a distant cousin visiting from out of town. Do you understand?" Esperanza nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone must be able to hear it. As she was led towards the grand staircase, where she would make her entrance to the gala, Esperanza felt as though she were walking in a dream. Or perhaps a nightmare. The glittering lights, the murmur of refined conversation, the clink of champagne glasses, it was all so far removed from her normal life that it hardly seemed real. At the top of the stairs, she paused, taking a deep breath. Below, the crowd of California's wealthiest and most influential citizens waited, unaware of the deception about to be played out before them. Esperanza touched the diamond at her throat, its cool weight both thrilling and terrifying. For a moment, she considered running. She could tear off the necklace, flee into the night, leave behind this world of pretense and cruelty. But then she thought of Lily and Max, of the kindness she'd found amidst the coldness of the Blackwood household. She thought of her own past, of the hardships she'd overcome to get even this far. No, she wouldn't run. She would face this challenge as she had faced every other in her life, with dignity, grace, and an unwavering spirit. Taking another deep breath, Esperanza began her descent down the stairs. As she emerged into view of the assembled guests, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to her, drawn by the spectacular jewel at her throat and the quiet beauty of the woman wearing it. In that moment, as flashbulbs popped and whispers of admiration rippled through the crowd, Esperanza felt a strange sense of power. For once, she wasn't invisible. For this one night, she wasn't just the humble nanny, easily dismissed and overlooked. Little did she know that among the sea of unfamiliar faces, one pair of eyes watched her with more than just casual interest. Hidden in the shadows at the back of the room, a figure from Esperanza's past stared in disbelief, recognition dawning like a thunderbolt. As Esperanza reached the bottom of the stairs, stepping into her role in this elaborate charade, the wheels of fate began to turn. Secrets long buried were stirring, ready to burst forth and change everything. The night of the Blackwood Charity Gala was just beginning, and with it, a journey that would lead Esperanza to uncover shocking truths about her past, challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, and ultimately, redefine her future in ways she could never have imagined. The gala was in full swing, a swirl of designer gowns, polished tuxedos, and sparkling jewelry. Esperanza moved through the crowd with a grace she didn't know she possessed, the starburst diamond glittering at her throat like a captive star. She smiled and nodded, speaking as little as possible, just as Victoria had instructed. To her surprise, she found that most of the guests barely seemed to notice her beyond the spectacular necklace she wore. They were far more interested in being seen, in making connections, in furthering their own agendas. It was a world so far removed from her own that Esperanza felt like an anthropologist observing some strange, glittering tribe. As she paused by a marble column, taking a moment to catch her breath, a voice behind her made her freeze. Well, if it isn't little Esperanza Fuentes. Or should I say, the long-lost Blackwood cousin? Esperanza turned slowly, her heart pounding. She found herself face to face with a man in his early 40s, distinguished-looking with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes. There was something vaguely familiar about him, but she couldn't quite place it. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "Do I know you?" The man's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I think you do, Esperanza. Though you were just a child when we last met. Does the name Jack Hawthorne ring any bells?" Esperanza felt the blood drain from her face. Jack Hawthorne. The name unlocked a flood of memories she'd long suppressed, memories of a grand house much like this one, of laughter and love, and then of tears and heartbreak. "Uncle Jack?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Jack's smile widened, becoming almost predatory. "So you do remember. I must say, this is quite a surprise. When I came here tonight, I certainly didn't expect to find Maria's little girl playing dress-up with the Blackwoods." Esperanza glanced around nervously, terrified that someone might overhear. "Please," she said quietly, "not here. I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can," Jack interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm very interested to hear how the daughter of my family's former maid ended up masquerading as a society girl at one of the biggest events of the season. But you're right, this isn't the place." He pulled a business card from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. "Meet me tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss." With that, he melted back into the crowd, leaving Esperanza shaken and confused. She stared at the card in her hand, embossed with the logo of Hawthorne Industries, one of the largest tech companies in Silicon Valley. Her mind was reeling. Uncle Jack, not her real uncle, but her mother's former employer and a man who had once been like family, was here. He knew who she really was. And tomorrow, she would have to face him and the past she tried so hard to leave behind. But there was no time to dwell on it now. Victoria was approaching, her face a mask of forced pleasantry that did little to hide the suspicion in her eyes. "Is everything all right?" Victoria asked, her voice low. "You look pale." Esperanza quickly composed herself, slipping the business card into a hidden pocket in her gown. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. Just a little overwhelmed by all the attention." Victoria's eyes narrowed, but before she could say anything more, Gregory appeared at her side. "Darling, the Andersons are asking about the silent auction." "We should go mingle," he said, placing a gentle hand on his wife's elbow. Victoria allowed herself to be steered away, but not before casting one last suspicious glance at Esperanza. Left alone once more, Esperanza took a shaky breath. The encounter with Jack Hawthorne had thrown her completely off balance. Memories she'd long suppressed were bubbling to the surface, threatening to overwhelm her. She remembered the Hawthorne mansion, a place that had once been like a second home to her. Jack had been different then, younger, kinder, always ready with a joke or a word of encouragement. His wife, Sarah, had been like an aunt to Esperanza, teaching her to read and write in English when she wasn't helping her mother with the housework. But then came that terrible night, the argument, the shattering glass, her mother's tears. Esperanza had been only 8 years old, but the memory was seared into her brain. That was the night everything changed, the night they'd left the Hawthorne house for good. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, and Esperanza gratefully accepted a glass, sipping it slowly to calm her nerves. She knew she should be focusing on her role, on not arousing suspicion, but her mind kept returning to the business card hidden in her gown and the meeting that awaited her tomorrow. As she made her way through the crowded ballroom, she caught sight of Lily and Max, looking angelic in their formal wear. They were surrounded by a group of adults, all cooing over how adorable they looked. Esperanza felt a surge of affection for the children, momentarily pushing aside her worries. She was so focused on the children that she didn't notice the man approaching her until he spoke. "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but admire your necklace. It's truly spectacular." Esperanza turned to find herself face to face with one of the most handsome men she'd ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile, he radiated a kindness that immediately put her at ease. "Thank you," she replied, remembering her role. "It's a family heirloom." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that so? I was under the impression it was part of tonight's auction. I'm Adam Sullivan, by the way." He extended his hand. Esperanza felt her cheeks flush as she shook his hand. "Oh, of course. I meant it's been in the family, for the auction. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at this." To her surprise, Adam laughed. "Don't worry about it. To tell you the truth, I'm not very good at this either. These events always make me feel a bit out of place." His honesty was refreshing, and Esperanza found herself relaxing. "Me too," she admitted. "I'm Elizabeth. Elizabeth Blackwood." She stumbled over the lie, hating how easily it came to her lips. "Well, Elizabeth Blackwood, would you like to escape this crowd for a moment? I noticed there's a lovely garden terrace just through those doors." Esperanza hesitated. She knew she should stay visible, continue playing her part. But the thought of a few moments of peace, away from the prying eyes and whispered judgments, was too tempting to resist. "I'd like that," she said softly. Adam offered her his arm, and together they slipped away from the glittering throng and out into the cool night air. The terrace was bathed in soft moonlight, the fragrance of night-blooming jasmine filling the air. For a few blissful minutes, they talked about nothing of consequence: the weather, the flowers in the garden, the music drifting out from the ballroom. Adam was easy to talk to, his manner open and unpretentious. Esperanza found herself wishing, not for the first time that night, that she could be herself, that she didn't have to hide behind a facade of wealth and privilege. "So, Elizabeth," Adam said after a while, "what do you do when you're not attending glamorous charity galas?" Esperanza froze. This was dangerous territory. I work with children," she said finally, deciding that a partial truth was better than an outright lie. Adam's face lit up. "Really? That's wonderful. I'm a pediatrician myself. There's nothing quite like working with kids, is there? Their resilience, their joy, it's inspiring." Esperanza nodded, feeling a genuine smile spread across her face. "It really is. They have so much to teach us, if we're willing to listen." For a moment, they stood in companionable silence, looking out over the moonlit garden. Esperanza felt a strange sense of peace settle over her, as if for just this moment, all her worries and fears had melted away. But the moment was shattered by the sound of Victoria's voice, sharp and commanding, cutting through the night air. "Elizabeth! There you are. You're needed inside immediately." Esperanza turned to see Victoria standing in the doorway, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Beside her stood Jack Hawthorne, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," Esperanza said to Adam, her heart sinking. "I have to go." Adam nodded, looking concerned. "Of course. It was lovely meeting you, Elizabeth." I hope we'll have a chance to talk again soon. As Esperanza walked back into the ballroom, she could feel Victoria's eyes boring into her. Jack Hawthorne fell into step beside them, his presence adding an extra layer of tension to the already charged atmosphere. "Well, Elizabeth," Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "it seems you've been keeping secrets from us. Mr. Hawthorne here has some very interesting information about your background." Esperanza felt her world tilting on its axis. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading since she first set foot in the Blackwood mansion. Her carefully constructed life was about to come crashing down around her. But before Victoria could continue, a commotion near the auction tables caught everyone's attention. Shouts of alarm rang out, followed by the sound of breaking glass. "The necklace," someone cried. "The starburst diamond, it's gone." In the chaos that followed, Esperanza found herself being pulled in multiple directions. Victoria's iron grip on her arm, Jack Hawthorne's piercing gaze, the sea of confused and panicked faces surrounding her, it was all too much. With a strength born of desperation, she wrenched herself free and ran. Out of the ballroom, down the marble hallway, her heels clicking against the floor in a frantic rhythm. She had no plan, no destination in mind. All she knew was that she had to get away, had to escape the suffocating weight of lies and expectations that threatened to crush her. She burst out of a side door into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The sounds of the gala faded behind her as she stumbled across the manicured lawn, the dew-damp grass soaking the hem of her borrowed gown. Finally, she collapsed beneath a giant oak tree at the edge of the property. Leaning against its rough bark, she closed her eyes and tried to make sense of the whirlwind of events that had led her to this moment. How had everything gone so wrong? She'd only wanted to make a better life for herself, to escape the poverty and hardship that had defined her childhood. And now, in the span of a single evening, everything she'd worked for was crumbling around her. The sound of approaching footsteps made her open her eyes. For a wild moment, she thought it might be Adam, coming to offer comfort or assistance. But the figure that emerged from the shadows was the last person she expected to see. "Hello, Esperanza," said Jack Hawthorne, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I think it's time we had that talk." Esperanza stared at him, her mind racing. How had he found her? What did he want? And most importantly, what did he know about her past? "Uncle Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can explain." He held up a hand, silencing her. "Not here. Not now. There's too much at stake." He glanced over his shoulder, as if checking to see if they were being followed. "Listen carefully, Esperanza. Things are not what they seem. Your mother, there's something you need to know about her. About your real father." Esperanza felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her. "My real father? What are you talking about?" Jack opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a shout rang out from the direction of the house. "There they are!" Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, and Esperanza could make out the forms of several security guards running towards them. Jack grabbed her arm. "We have to go. Now. I'll explain everything, I promise, but we need to get somewhere safe first." For a moment, Esperanza hesitated. Everything in her screamed that this was wrong, that she should stay and face the consequences of her actions. But the urgency in Jack's voice, the promise of answers about her past, and the fear of what awaited her back at the mansion made the decision for her. She nodded once, and together, they melted into the shadows of the night. As they ran, ducking under low-hanging branches and navigating the uneven terrain, Esperanza's mind whirled with questions. What did Jack know about her mother? Who was her real father? And how was all of this connected to the missing starburst diamond? They reached a sleek black car parked just beyond the property line. Jack quickly ushered her into the passenger seat before sliding behind the wheel. As they sped away from the Blackwood estate, Esperanza caught a glimpse of her reflection in the side mirror, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, the borrowed gown dirty and torn. She hardly recognized herself. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice shaky. Jack's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. "Somewhere safe. A place where we can talk without fear of interruption or eavesdropping." They drove in silence for what felt like hours, the glittering lights of Beverly Hills giving way to the more modest neighborhoods of the valley, and then to the dark, winding roads of the canyons. Finally, Jack turned onto a narrow, unmarked driveway that led to a small, nondescript cabin nestled among the trees. "We're here," he said, killing the engine. Inside, the cabin was sparsely furnished but clean and well-maintained. Jack motioned for Esperanza to sit on a worn leather sofa while he busied himself in the small kitchenette, returning a few minutes later with 2 steaming mugs of tea. "I imagine you have a lot of questions," he said, settling into an armchair across from her. Esperanza nodded, her hands wrapped tightly around the warm mug. "Who am I, really? And what do you know about my mother? My real father?" Jack took a deep breath, his face etched with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Your mother, Maria, she wasn't just our maid, Esperanza. She was so much more than that. She was a brilliant woman, kind and brave, with a sharp mind for business. And she was my brother's wife." Esperanza felt as if she'd been struck. "Your brother? But that would mean—" "Yes," Jack said softly. "My brother, Thomas Hawthorne, was your biological father." The revelation hit Esperanza like a physical blow. She'd grown up believing her father was a nameless, faceless man who'd abandoned her mother before she was born. To learn that he was not only real but came from one of the wealthiest families in California, it was almost too much to comprehend. "But why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did we leave?" Jack's face darkened. "That's where things get complicated. Thomas and Maria's marriage was a secret. Our parents, they wouldn't have approved. Maria worked as our maid to be close to Thomas, and for a while, they were happy. But then—" He trailed off, lost in memory. Esperanza leaned forward, hanging on his every word. "Then what?" she prompted. Jack's eyes refocused on her. "Then Thomas discovered something. Something big. It involved our family's company, Hawthorne Industries. Illegal activities, money laundering, connections to organized crime. He wanted to go public, to expose everything. But before he could, he died." Esperanza finished for him, a memory surfacing of overheard conversations, of her mother crying late into the night. Jack nodded grimly. "It was made to look like an accident. A car crash. But your mother knew the truth. She tried to continue Thomas's work, to gather evidence, but it became too dangerous. That's why you left that night. She was protecting you." Esperanza's head was spinning. It was all too much, the truth about her parents, the revelation of a vast conspiracy, the implication that her father had been murdered. And yet, something didn't add up. "But why now?" she asked. "Why are you telling me all this after so many years?" Jack leaned forward, his expression intense. "Because the evidence your parents gathered, the proof of all the corruption and crimes? It's hidden in the starburst diamond." Esperanza gasped. "The necklace? But how?" "It's not just a diamond," Jack explained. "It's a sophisticated data storage device, disguised as a precious gem. Your father developed the technology. He hid all the incriminating information inside it, thinking it would be safe. But someone found out. That's why it was stolen tonight. Suddenly, all the pieces started falling into place. The elaborate charade at the gala, the sudden appearance of Jack Hawthorne, the theft of the necklace, it was all connected to a decades-old secret that had claimed her parents' lives. So what do we do now? Esperanza asked, feeling both terrified and strangely exhilarated. Jack's expression was grim but determined. We find that necklace. We expose the truth. And we clear your parents' names once and for all. As the weight of this new reality settled over her, Esperanza felt a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. Fear, certainly, at the danger they now faced. Anger at the lies and deceptions that had shaped her life. But also a strange sense of purpose, as if she'd finally found the missing piece of herself she'd always been searching for. I'm in, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Where do we start? Jack smiled, a hint of the uncle she remembered from her childhood shining through. We start by going back to where it all began. We're going to break into Hawthorne Industries. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Jack brought Esperanza up to speed on everything he knew about the conspiracy, showing her old photographs, news clippings, and snippets of evidence he'd gathered over the years. They pored over blueprints of the Hawthorne Industries headquarters, planning their infiltration down to the last detail. All the while, Esperanza's mind kept returning to the life she'd left behind. She wondered about Lily and Max, hoping they weren't too upset by her sudden disappearance. She thought about Adam Sullivan, the kind doctor she'd met at the gala, and felt a pang of regret for the connection they'd barely had a chance to explore. And then there was Victoria Blackwood. Esperanza couldn't help but wonder what had happened in the aftermath of the gala. Had Victoria discovered the truth about her identity? What story had been concocted to explain her disappearance? She found herself both dreading and longing for the day when she could return and set things right. But for now, she had to focus on the task at hand. Breaking into one of the most secure buildings in Silicon Valley was no small feat, even with Jack's inside knowledge and connections. The night of the break-in arrived all too soon. Dressed in black and equipped with state-of-the-art hacking tools, Esperanza found herself crouched in the shadows outside the imposing Hawthorne Industries building. Remember the plan, Jack's voice crackled through her earpiece. Get to the 47th floor. That's where Thomas's old office was. If the necklace is anywhere in the building, it'll be there. Esperanza took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. I'm ready, she whispered back. Using the access codes Jack had provided, she slipped into the building, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give her away. The lobby was dark and deserted, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning system. Esperanza made her way to the service elevator, just as they had planned. As she rode up to the 47th floor, she couldn't help but marvel at how much her life had changed in such a short time. Just days ago, she had been a nanny, worrying about bedtimes and piano lessons. Now, she was breaking into a high-security building, searching for a diamond that held the key to a decades-old conspiracy. The elevator doors slid open silently, revealing a long, dimly lit corridor. Esperanza stepped out cautiously, her eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The floor seemed deserted, but she knew better than to let her guard down. I'm in, she whispered into her communicator. Good, Jack's voice crackled in response. Thomas's office should be at the end of the hall on your right. Be careful, Esperanza. There might be security measures we don't know about. She moved swiftly down the hallway, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. When she reached the door marked Thomas Hawthorne, Chief Technology Officer, she paused, her hand hovering over the handle. This was it. The office of the father she had never known. What secrets would she find inside? Taking a deep breath, Esperanza used the keycard Jack had given her to unlock the door. It swung open with a soft click, revealing a large, elegantly furnished office. Moonlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the room. As she stepped inside, Esperanza was struck by a sense of familiarity. The room smelled of leather and old books, reminiscent of the library in the Hawthorne mansion where she had spent so many happy hours as a child. Had her father's scent lingered here all these years? Pushing aside the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her, Esperanza focused on the task at hand. She began systematically searching the office, careful not to disturb anything more than necessary. She checked the desk drawers, the filing cabinets, even behind the paintings on the walls, looking for any sign of a hidden safe or compartment where the starburst diamond might be concealed. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she had found nothing. Frustration welled up inside her. Where could it be? "Jack," she whispered into her communicator, "I've searched everywhere. It's not here." There was a moment of static before Jack's voice came through, tense with worry. "It has to be. Keep looking, Esperanza. Try to think like Thomas. Where would he hide something he didn't want anyone else to find?" Esperanza closed her eyes, trying to channel the father she had never known. What would a brilliant, paranoid technologist do with a piece of vital evidence? Her eyes snapped open as a memory surfaced, not of her father, but of Lily, the little girl she had cared for at the Blackwood house. Lily had a secret hiding place for her most treasured possessions, a hollow book on her bookshelf. With renewed energy, Esperanza turned to the large bookcase that dominated one wall of the office. She began pulling out books at random, flipping through their pages, looking for any that seemed unusually heavy or had pages glued together. Just as she was about to give up hope, her hand closed around a thick volume titled Advanced Quantum Computing. As she pulled it from the shelf, she noticed it was significantly heavier than it should be. Her heart racing, Esperanza opened the book. Inside, she found a cutout compartment, and nestled within it, gleaming in the moonlight, was the starburst diamond. "I found it," she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "Excellent work," Jack's voice came through, filled with relief and excitement. "Now, get out of there quickly. We don't know who else might be looking for it." Esperanza carefully placed the necklace in the secure pouch she had brought for this purpose. She was about to leave when something else caught her eye, a small, leather-bound journal tucked into the same hiding place as the diamond. Without hesitation, she grabbed the journal as well. If it had been hidden with the diamond, it must be important. As she turned to leave, a sound from the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps, growing louder by the second. "Someone's coming," she whispered urgently into her communicator. "Hide," Jack commanded. "Don't let them see you." Esperanza looked around frantically, her eyes landing on a large wardrobe in the corner of the office. Without a second thought, she dove inside, pulling the doors closed just as the office door swung open. Through a small crack between the wardrobe doors, Esperanza watched as two men entered the office. Her blood ran cold as she recognized one of them. It was Gregory Blackwood, her former employer. "Are you sure about this, sir?" the other man was saying. He was tall and muscular, clearly some kind of security personnel. Gregory's face was set in grim lines. "I'm sure, Johnson. That necklace is the key to everything. If we don't find it soon, all of our careful planning will have been for nothing." Esperanza's mind reeled. Gregory was involved in this too? How deep did this conspiracy go? She watched as the two men began to search the office, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they would hear it. When Gregory approached the bookshelf, she held her breath, certain that at any moment he would discover the empty hiding place and realize someone had beaten him to the prize. But to her surprise and relief, Gregory barely glanced at the books before moving on to search elsewhere. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few minutes, the men gave up their search. "It's not here," Gregory said, his voice tight with frustration. "We'll have to look elsewhere." Come on, let's check the R&D department. As soon as the door closed behind them, Esperanza let out a shaky breath. She waited a few more minutes to be sure they were gone before emerging from her hiding place. Jack, she whispered, we have a problem. Gregory Blackwood is here, looking for the necklace. He's involved in this somehow. There was a moment of tense silence before Jack responded. This complicates things. Get out of there now, Esperanza. We'll regroup and figure out our next move. Clutching the pouch containing the necklace and the journal tightly to her chest, Esperanza made her way back to the service elevator. Her mind was whirling with questions. How was Gregory connected to all of this? What did this mean for Lily and Max? And what secrets did the journal hold? As the elevator descended, Esperanza felt a mix of triumph and trepidation. They had the necklace, but their mission was far from over. In fact, it seemed that things were about to get much more complicated. She emerged from the Hawthorne Industries building into the cool night air, her senses on high alert for any sign of pursuit. Jack was waiting in a nondescript sedan across the street, the engine already running. Esperanza slipped into the passenger seat, and they sped away into the night. Only when they were several miles from the building did she allow herself to relax slightly. We did it, she said, still hardly able to believe it herself. Jack nodded, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. We did. But our work is just beginning. Now we need to decrypt the data in that necklace and figure out exactly what we're dealing with. They drove in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Esperanza's mind kept returning to the scene she had witnessed in her father's office. Gregory Blackwood's involvement added a whole new layer of complexity to an already tangled web of secrets and lies. As they neared the outskirts of the city, Jack suddenly made a sharp turn onto a narrow side road. Where are we going? Esperanza asked, startled out of her reverie. I have a safe house set up, Jack explained. We'll be able to work there without fear of interruption or discovery. The safe house turned out to be a modest cabin tucked away in a densely wooded area. As they pulled up, Esperanza couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. It reminded her of the cabin where Jack had first revealed the truth about her parents. Inside, the cabin was sparse but functional, with a small living area dominated by several high-tech computer setups. Jack immediately set to work, connecting the starburst diamond to one of the computers through a series of complex-looking adapters. This might take a while, he said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Why don't you take a look at that journal you found? It might give us some additional insights. Esperanza nodded, settling onto a worn sofa with the leather-bound journal. As she opened it, a slip of paper fell out, a photograph. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized it was a picture of her parents. Her mother, Maria, looked young and radiant, her dark eyes sparkling with joy. Beside her stood a man Esperanza had never seen before, but whose features she recognized from her own reflection. Thomas Hawthorne had the same high cheekbones, the same slight dimple in his chin. With trembling hands, Esperanza turned to the first page of the journal. It was dated 25 years ago, just a few months before her birth. I've made a terrible discovery, the entry began. Asterisk the company my family built, the legacy I've worked so hard to uphold, it's all built on lies and corruption. I don't know who I can trust anymore. But I know I have to do something. For Maria. For our unborn child. I have to make this right. Asterisk. As Esperanza read on, a picture began to emerge of a man torn between loyalty to his family and his own moral compass. Thomas wrote of secret meetings, of evidence gathered in the dead of night, of a growing fear that his actions had not gone unnoticed. The final entry, dated just days before Thomas's death, chilled Esperanza to the bone. Asterisk they know. I don't know how, but they've figured out what I'm doing. I fear for my life, but more than that, I fear for Maria and our child. I've hidden everything, all the evidence, all the proof, in the only place I know they'll never think to look. My darling Maria, if you're reading this, know that I love you both more than life itself. And to my child, whom I may never have the chance to meet, never stop fighting for what's right, no matter the cost. Asterisk. Tears streamed down Esperanza's face as she finished reading. She had always wondered about her father, had always felt his absence like a physical ache. Now, reading his words, feeling his love and his fear reach out to her across the years, she felt a connection to him she had never experienced before. Esperanza, Jack's voice broke through her emotional haze. I've done it. I've decrypted the data. She moved to join him at the computer, wiping her eyes. What did you find? Jack's face was grim. It's worse than we thought. Much worse. The corruption doesn't just extend to Hawthorne Industries. It goes all the way to the top, senators, judges, even. He trailed off, his eyes widening in shock as he stared at the screen. Even what? Esperanza prompted, a sense of dread growing in the pit of her stomach. Jack turned to her, his face pale. Even the governor. Victoria Blackwood's father. The revelation hit Esperanza like a physical blow. Suddenly, everything clicked into place: Victoria's constant suspicion, her obsession with appearances, her desperation to get her hands on the starburst diamond. She had known all along what it contained. We have to go public with this, Esperanza said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. We have to finish what my father started. Jack nodded slowly. You're right. But it won't be easy. These people, they're powerful, connected. They'll do anything to keep this information from getting out. As if to underscore his point, a loud crash suddenly echoed through the cabin. Both Esperanza and Jack whirled around to see the front door splintering inward, kicked open by a group of men in black tactical gear. Run! Jack yelled, grabbing the necklace and a portable hard drive. Take the back exit! Esperanza snatched up her father's journal and bolted for the rear of the cabin, her heart pounding in her ears. She could hear shouts and the sound of breaking glass behind her as she burst out into the cool night air. She ran blindly through the woods, branches whipping at her face, the sound of pursuit growing ever closer. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to get away, had to protect the truth her father had died for. Suddenly, a strong arm grabbed her from behind, pulling her into a dense thicket. She opened her mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over it. Shoo, a familiar voice whispered in her ear. It's me. It's Adam. Esperanza's eyes widened in shock as she turned to face Adam Sullivan, the doctor she had met at the Blackwood Gala. What was he doing here? I'll explain everything, Adam said quietly, his eyes scanning the darkness around them. But right now, we need to get you somewhere safe. Do you trust me? For a moment, Esperanza hesitated. Her world had been turned upside down so many times in the past few days. How could she know who to trust? But as she looked into Adam's eyes, she saw nothing but sincerity and concern. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Lead the way. As they crept through the underbrush, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them, Esperanza clutched her father's journal to her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she would see this through to the end, no matter the cost. The truth her parents had fought and died for would finally come to light. And maybe, just maybe, she would find justice for them at last. Adam led Esperanza through the dense forest with the sure-footed confidence of someone intimately familiar with the terrain. They moved swiftly but cautiously, pausing often to listen for any signs of pursuit. As they traveled, Esperanza's mind raced with questions. How had Adam found her? How was he connected to all of this? And what had happened to Jack? After what felt like hours but was probably only about 45 minutes, they emerged from the woods onto a narrow dirt road. A battered pickup truck was parked there, its dull paint blending into the shadows. "Get in," Adam said, quickly ushering her into the passenger seat before sliding behind the wheel. As they drove away, bouncing along the uneven road, Esperanza finally found her voice. "Adam, what's going on? How did you find me?" Adam's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's a long story, Esperanza. Or should I say, Elizabeth?" He gave her a sidelong glance, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth despite the tension evident in his posture. Esperanza felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "You knew?" "Not at first," Adam admitted. "But after the gala, after you disappeared, I started asking questions. And the answers I found led me down a rabbit hole I never expected." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "My real name isn't Adam Sullivan. It's Adam Hawthorne. I'm your cousin, Esperanza. Jack is my father." The revelation hit Esperanza like a physical blow. She stared at Adam, seeing him with new eyes. Now that she knew to look for it, she could see the family resemblance, the same strong jawline, the same kind eyes that she remembered from her childhood encounters with Jack. But why the deception?" she asked, struggling to make sense of this new information. "Why didn't you tell me who you were at the gala?" Adam's expression darkened. "Because at the time, I didn't know if I could trust you. I've been working undercover for years, trying to unravel the web of corruption my Uncle Thomas first discovered. When I saw you at the gala, wearing the starburst diamond, I knew something big was happening. But I couldn't risk exposing myself until I was sure of your involvement." Esperanza's head was spinning with this new revelation. She took a deep breath, trying to process everything Adam had just told her. "So all this time, you've been working to uncover the truth? Just like my father?" Adam nodded, his eyes still fixed on the winding road ahead. "Yes. It's been my life's mission. When Uncle Thomas died, my father, Jack, knew it wasn't an accident. He's been investigating ever since, and when I was old enough to understand, I joined the fight." As they drove through the night, Adam filled Esperanza in on the details of his undercover work. He explained how he had infiltrated the highest echelons of California society, posing as a pediatrician to the rich and powerful. His position had allowed him to gather invaluable information, slowly piecing together the vast conspiracy that had claimed her parents' lives. "But why didn't Jack tell me about you?" Esperanza asked, still struggling to reconcile this new reality. Adam's expression softened. "To protect both of us. The fewer people who knew the truth, the safer we all were. But when he realized you were working for the Blackwoods, he knew it was time to bring you in. That's why he approached you at the gala." Esperanza nodded slowly, pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. But one question still nagged at her. What about Jack? Is he okay? Those men who attacked the cabin. "Don't worry," Adam reassured her. "Dad's tough. He has escape routes and safe houses set up all over the state. He'll contact us when it's safe." They lapsed into silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Esperanza's mind kept returning to the Blackwood children, Lily and Max. Had they been part of this deception too? No, she decided. Their affection, their innocence, that had been real. As if reading her thoughts, Adam spoke up. "You're wondering about the kids, aren't you?" Esperanza nodded, grateful for his perceptiveness. "They're innocent in all this," Adam said softly. "Gregory and Victoria may be involved in this mess, but Lily and Max, they're just children. They care about you, you know. They've been asking about you since you disappeared." A lump formed in Esperanza's throat. Despite everything that had happened, she missed those kids fiercely. "Where are we going?" she asked, realizing she had no idea where Adam was taking her. "To meet with someone who can help us blow this whole thing wide open," Adam replied. "An investigative journalist I've been feeding information to for months. With the evidence from the Starburst Diamond and your father's journal, we finally have enough to go public." As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, they arrived in San Francisco. Adam navigated the early morning traffic with ease, finally pulling up in front of a nondescript apartment building in the Mission District. "Come on," he said, leading her inside and up several flights of stairs. They stopped in front of a door on the 4th floor. Adam knocked in a specific pattern, 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more. After a moment, the door opened a crack, revealing a sliver of a face. "It's me, Samantha," Adam said quietly. "I've brought her." The door swung open fully, revealing a woman in her mid-30s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a mop of unruly red hair. She ushered them inside quickly, locking the door behind them. "So you're the missing nanny," Samantha said, eyeing Esperanza with interest. "I've heard a lot about you." Esperanza wasn't sure how to respond to that, but before she could say anything, Samantha was all business. "Let's see what you've got." For the next several hours, they pored over the evidence. Samantha's eyes grew wider and wider as she scrolled through the decrypted files from the Starburst Diamond. Esperanza's father's journal provided crucial context, connecting dots that had long eluded them. This is huge," Samantha breathed, looking up from her computer. "We're talking about corruption at the highest levels of state government, reaching all the way to Silicon Valley and Wall Street. This could bring down entire power structures." "That's the idea," Adam said grimly. "It's what my uncle died for. What Esperanza's parents sacrificed everything for." Esperanza felt a swell of emotion at his words. For so long, she had felt adrift, unsure of her place in the world. Now, she was part of something bigger than herself, continuing the fight her parents had begun. "So what's our next move?" she asked, determination replacing the fear and uncertainty that had plagued her for days. Samantha leaned back in her chair, a fierce glint in her eye. "We publish. We blast this story across every platform we can access. But we have to move fast. Once this goes live, all hell is going to break loose." They spent the next few hours preparing. Samantha worked on drafting the expose, while Adam reached out to his contacts in law enforcement, the few he was certain weren't compromised. Esperanza found herself poring over her father's journal again, drawing strength from his words, feeling closer to him than she ever had before. As evening approached, a sense of nervous anticipation filled the small apartment. They were nearly ready. Samantha was putting the finishing touches on the article, Adam was coordinating with his FBI contact, and Esperanza was steeling herself for the storm that was about to break. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. "Were you expecting anyone?" Samantha whispered, her hand hovering over the keyboard, ready to hit publish at a moment's notice. Adam shook his head, moving silently towards the door. He peered through the peephole, then let out a relieved breath. "It's my father," he said, quickly unlocking the door. Jack Hawthorne burst into the room, looking disheveled but very much alive. "We've got a problem," he said without preamble. "They're onto us. We need to move, now." As if to underscore his words, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the stairwell outside. "Samantha, publish it now," Adam said urgently. "We're out of time." With a decisive click, Samantha sent the story live. "It's done," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "God help us all." The footsteps were getting closer. Jack was already ushering them towards the fire escape. "We need to split up," he said quickly. "Adam, take Esperanza. Samantha, you're with me. We'll rendezvous at the backup location in 24 hours. As they clambered down the fire escape, Esperanza could hear the sound of splintering wood as the apartment door was broken down. Her heart was pounding, but along with the fear was a sense of exhilaration. The truth was out there now. There was no going back. Adam led her through a maze of alleyways, always staying one step ahead of their pursuers. As they ran, Esperanza could see people on the street staring at their phones, their expressions shocked and disbelieving. The story was spreading like wildfire. They finally lost their tail in the crowded streets of Chinatown, ducking into a small, hole-in-the-wall restaurant. As they caught their breath, Adam's phone buzzed with an incoming call. "It's my FBI contact," he said, answering quickly. He listened for a moment, his expression growing more and more relieved. "Understood. We'll be there." He turned to Esperanza, a smile breaking across his face. "It's happening. The FBI is moving in. Arrests are already being made. The governor, half the state senate, the CEO of Hawthorne Industries, they're all being taken into custody." Esperanza felt a wave of emotion wash over her, relief, vindication, and a bittersweet sense of justice for her parents. "It's really over?" she asked, hardly daring to believe it. Adam nodded, pulling her into a tight hug. "It's over. You did it, Esperanza. You finished what your parents started." As the adrenaline of the past few days began to wear off, Esperanza felt the weight of everything she'd been through settle over her. She was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained. But there was one more thing she needed to do. "The Blackwoods," she said suddenly, pulling back from Adam's embrace. "What about Lily and Max?" Adam's expression softened with understanding. "Let's go check on them," he said. "I have a feeling they could use a friendly face right about now." They made their way cautiously to the Blackwood mansion, unsure of what they would find. The scene that greeted them was one of barely controlled chaos. Police cars lined the street, their lights casting eerie blue and red shadows across the manicured lawns. Officers were escorting a handcuffed Gregory Blackwood to a waiting patrol car, while Victoria stood on the front steps, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. But it was the two small figures huddled together on the porch that caught Esperanza's attention. Lily and Max looked lost and scared, clinging to each other as their world fell apart around them. Without hesitation, Esperanza rushed forward. "Lily! Max!" she called out. The children's heads snapped up at the sound of her voice. For a moment, they stared at her in disbelief. Then, with cries of "Esp," they ran towards her, throwing themselves into her arms. Esperanza held them close, murmuring words of comfort as they sobbed into her shoulders. Over their heads, her eyes met Victoria's. The woman who had once looked at her with such disdain now seemed small and broken, the veneer of superiority shattered. For a moment, Esperanza felt a flash of satisfaction. But as she looked at the devastated family before her, she realized that there were no true winners in this situation. The corrupt would face justice, yes, but innocent lives had been upended in the process. As the children's sobs subsided, Esperanza gently pulled back to look at them. "Listen to me," she said softly. "I know things are scary and confusing right now. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault. And no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. Okay?" Lily and Max nodded, their tear-stained faces serious. "Promise?" Lily asked in a small voice. "I promise," Esperanza said firmly, pulling them close once more. In that moment, surrounded by the aftermath of the scandal she had helped expose, Esperanza felt a sense of purpose solidify within her. She couldn't change the past or undo the damage that had been done. But she could be there for these children, a steady presence in the storm of uncertainty they now faced. As dawn broke over Beverly Hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Esperanza stood on the front lawn of the Blackwood mansion, Lily and Max's hands clasped tightly in hers. Adam stood beside her, a supportive presence at her side. She thought of her parents, of her mother's strength and her father's determination to do what was right, no matter the cost. She thought of Jack and Adam, who had dedicated their lives to uncovering the truth. And she thought of her own journey, from a humble nanny to a key player in exposing a vast conspiracy. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be trials and depositions, media scrutiny, and difficult questions. The full impact of the scandal was yet to be felt, and the ripple effects would likely be felt for years to come. But as Esperanza looked down at Lily and Max, saw the trust shining in their eyes, she knew that she was exactly where she needed to be. She had found her purpose, her place in the world. And she would face whatever challenges lay ahead with the same courage and determination that had brought her this far. "What happens now?" Max asked, his small voice filled with uncertainty. Esperanza squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Now, we move forward," she said. "Together." As the first rays of sunlight bathed them in a warm glow, Esperanza felt a sense of hope bloom in her chest. The truth had finally come to light, and with it, the chance for a new beginning. For herself, for the children, and for all those who had been touched by the long-buried secrets of the past. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but standing there in the early morning light, Esperanza knew that the most important chapter of her story was just beginning. Epilogue. 1 year later. The California sun beat down on the sprawling lawn of the repurposed Blackwood mansion, now transformed into a home for children affected by the far-reaching scandal that had rocked the state. Laughter and excited chatter filled the air as kids of all ages enjoyed the annual summer picnic. Esperanza moved through the crowd, a smile on her face as she greeted children and staff members alike. She paused to ruffle Max's hair as he ran past, chasing after a soccer ball, and waved to Lily, who was helping some of the younger kids with a crafts project. So much had changed in the past year. The trials had concluded, with many of the key players in the conspiracy facing long prison sentences. Hawthorne Industries had been restructured under new leadership with a commitment to ethical business practices and transparency. As for Esperanza, she had found her calling. Using the settlement money from the lawsuit against the corrupt officials and corporations, she had established this home, providing a safe haven and support for children whose lives had been upended by their parents' crimes. "Everything looks great," a familiar voice said behind her. Esperanza turned to see Adam approaching, a tray of lemonade in his hands. "Couldn't have done it without you," she replied warmly. Over the past year, their relationship had deepened, growing from allies in a fight for justice to something more. Adam's steady presence and unwavering support had been a constant source of strength for Esperanza as she navigated the challenges of setting up and running the home. As they walked together, greeting guests and checking on the various activities, Esperanza caught sight of a familiar face near the refreshment table. Victoria Blackwood, looking far more subdued than in her socialite days, was helping to serve food. After her husband's conviction, Victoria had been left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. To everyone's surprise, she had approached Esperanza a few months ago, asking if there was anything she could do to help with the home. It had been a difficult decision, but Esperanza had chosen to give her a chance. Victoria's journey towards redemption was ongoing, but her efforts to make amends seemed genuine. Mrs. Blackwood, Esperanza greeted her with a nod. "How are things going over here?" Victoria managed a small smile. "Everything's under control. The kids seem to be enjoying themselves." "They are," Esperanza agreed. "Thank you for your help today." As they continued their rounds, Adam squeezed Esperanza's hand. "You know, Your parents would be incredibly proud of you, he said softly. Esperanza felt a familiar pang in her heart at the mention of her parents, but it was tempered by a sense of peace. I hope so, she replied. I think they'd be happy to see their fight wasn't in vain. They paused at the edge of the lawn, looking out over the scene before them. Children played and laughed, free from the burdens of their parents' misdeeds. Staff members and volunteers, many of whom had been affected by the scandal in their own ways, worked together to create a nurturing environment. And at the center of it all was Esperanza, the once ridiculed nanny who had risen above adversity to become a beacon of hope and change. As the afternoon wore on, Esperanza found herself sitting on a bench beneath the old oak tree where she had often read stories to Lily, and Max Jack Hawthorne, looking relaxed and content in his retirement, joined her. You've done an amazing thing here, Esperanza, he said, his voice filled with pride. You've taken something painful and turned it into a force for good. Esperanza smiled, watching as Lily patiently taught a younger girl how to braid friendship bracelets. I had good examples to follow, she said. My parents, you, Adam, you all showed me the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Jack nodded, his eyes misty with emotion. Thomas and Maria would be so proud of you. You've honored their memory in the best way possible. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the gathering, Esperanza stood to address the crowd. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to her, children and adults alike waiting expectantly. Thank you all for being here today, Esperanza began, her voice clear and strong. A year ago, many of us were strangers, brought together by circumstances we never could have imagined. We've all been through so much, pain, loss, betrayal. But look at us now. She gestured to the crowd, her eyes shining with emotion. We've created something beautiful here. A place of healing, of second chances, of hope. Each one of you, whether you're a child finding your way, a volunteer giving your time, or a staff member dedicating your life to this cause, you are proof that even in the darkest times, light can prevail. Esperanza paused, her gaze finding Lily and Max in the crowd. They beamed up at her, their faces full of love and trust. To the children here today, I want you to know that you are not defined by the actions of your parents. You are your own person, with your own bright future ahead of you. And we are all here to support you every step of the way. She then turned to the adults. And to those of us who have the privilege of guiding these young lives, let us never forget the responsibility we bear. Let us strive every day to be worthy of the trust these children place in us. As Esperanza spoke, Victoria Blackwood listened intently, tears streaming down her face. The woman who had once looked down on Esperanza now regarded her with a mixture of respect and regret. A wise person once told me that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall, Esperanza continued. We've all fallen. We've all struggled. But look at us now, we're standing tall, together. She raised her glass of lemonade. So here's to second chances. To new beginnings. To the family we choose, and the love that binds us together. Here's to all of you, and to the bright future we're building, one day at a time. A chorus of cheers and applause rang out across the lawn. As Esperanza stepped down, she was immediately engulfed in a group hug led by Lily, and Max Adam joined them, wrapping his arms around all three, his eyes shining with pride and love. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Esperanza found herself once again under the old oak tree. She closed her eyes, listening to the fading sounds of laughter and goodbye, feeling the gentle breeze on her face. In that moment, she could almost feel the presence of her parents. She imagined her mother's gentle smile, her father's proud gaze. They had sacrificed everything for the truth, and though they were gone, their legacy lived on in the lives touched by their courage. Esperanza opened her eyes to see Adam approaching, his hand outstretched. Ready to go home? He asked softly. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I am home," she replied, her heart full. As they walked together towards the house, Esperanza reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a humble nanny, ridiculed and underestimated, to the founder of a home that was changing lives. She had uncovered painful truths, faced dangerous foes, and emerged stronger for it all. The path ahead was not without its challenges. There were still wounds to heal, systems to change, and battles to be fought. But Esperanza was no longer afraid. She had found her strength, her purpose, and her family. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Esperanza knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. A new chapter in a story of resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of love. And so, as Esperanza Martinez, daughter, friend, caregiver, and champion of truth, stepped into her future, she did so with hope in her heart and the knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage, compassion, and the unwavering support of the family she had found.